One of the teachings I received many years ago was that if I can't think of any other pose to do for yoga practice, just do downward facing dog. It has become my go-to yoga pose for those times where my mind is so filled with responsibilities that I can't focus on the practice. In this practice, we'll be doing poses that really enhance our downward facing dog so that when we have those times where we can't think of anything else to do, our downward facing dog will be so refined. We'll begin by standing with feet hip distance apart. Thank you, Cindy, for the great down dog shirt that you gave me. It's one of my favorites to wear for practicing yoga. As you come to stand with your feet hip distance apart, lift your arms and just bend your knees as if you're going into a squat. As you bend your knees and draw your pelvis back and just kind of pulse a few times, you'll start to get a little bit more fluidity in the pelvic area, stretch the backs of the legs. Perhaps you can go a little bit deeper, either with your arms up or your arms to your side. See about taking the pelvis back so that the knees are not coming so far forward. So as you draw back, it's not how deep you go. We're just getting the hip area lubricated, the calf muscles elongated, just getting the legs a little bit more alive. Now place your hands right above your knees with your heart drawing forward, your chin lifted. You get this nice curve in the spine. Now draw from the navel back. Inhale, draw in through the nose and lift your sit bones. Exhale, draw from the navel back to the spine. Just continue with a nice easy breath. Now we're working to get a little bit more flexibility in the low back. So often when you see people doing their downward facing dog, there's so much rounding or kyphosis in the spine. We want to create just a little bit more fullness to the natural curves of the spine. So you're lifting your sit bones and you're drawing the tailbone down, just getting the pelvic movement there. And you can just move very easily to find fullness in the back body while still getting more strength in the curve. Now come to the top of your mat. Step your left foot back with both legs straight. Place your hands to your hips and draw your heart forward. Keep the elbows hugging in as the back heel stays plugged in. You root down through the back foot to inhale and rise up. Do that several more times here with the back leg planted nicely. Exhale, draw down just to get more awareness to the back sides of both legs here. Lift up on the in-breath. Exhale, long exhale breath. Takes you maybe slightly deeper into the pose. And inhale takes you out of the pose. Two more, draw down. And lift up. And one more, draw down. This version of Parsvottanasana where we're just kind of pulsing in the pose here to prepare ourselves. Step your right foot back now with the left foot forward. And let's do the same thing with the back heel parked firmly down. Draw your heart forward and down. Inhale, lift up. Exhale, draw down. The legs are so active, they're scissoring in toward each other. 3 more, draw down, maybe deeper. See if you can go a little bit slower so that you can find a little bit more fullness. 2 more. And 1 more. So now that you've got the backs of the legs stretched nicely, let's come to a nice wide stance. In the wide stance, we'll get our first taste of downward facing dog. Rather than placing your hands in that space right between the feet, let's reach the hands out for this variation. So take your hands down to the floor and by all means, bend your knees. So as you bend your knees, notice how you can lift your sit bones higher. That gives you a little bit more curve. You can walk your hands forward. Keep the hands nice distance apart, shoulder width apart at least. Spread your fingers, relax your head. And as you pull the feet in toward each other, get this nice fullness and this lift to the shoulders. Keep the knees bent. So for some of us, we need to keep the knees bent a lot to get that curve. Breathe in and breathe out long. Enjoy this nice variation to downward facing dog with this wide stance. Now walk your hands back toward your feet and heel toe your feet in toward each other. Bend your knees to place your hands to your low back and rise up. So we did this wide stance for downward facing dog. Now let's come to our knees to do a variation. They call it puppy dog. So as you come to your knees, in the same way that we just did, keep your hands nice and wide apart, your fingers spreading nicely. Draw your pelvis slightly back. It may be right over your knees or further back. Release your head down. Keep your shoulder blades lifted. Now the belly wants to sag toward the earth. See if you can draw from the navel back to the spine to get a little bit more fullness in the kidney area as you keep the fullness and the lifting quality in the shoulders. Relax your head. Enjoy your breath. Now we're in a different form of downward dog. This is the puppy dog version, but it's a really strong version. If you're engaging the muscles nicely, if you tuck your toes under, you can get the legs to work a little bit more fully. The legs are hugging in toward the midline of your stance. Your armpits are lifting up, shoulders are lifting up so that the heart can soften down. Nice engagement. And now lift yourself up to come to downward facing dog. So tuck your toes under, lift your pelvis up, walk your feet to your hands, place your hands to your low back and rise up. One of the things that you'll often see in the yoga classes that you go to is people in really short downward facing dogs, right? And it's a very kyphotic form of the spine. Let's refresh our practice to discover how far we should keep our hands from our feet so that we're not rounding the spine, we're just supporting the natural curves of the spine. Come to your belly to do so. You'll find another video in the links below that speaks to the placement of the hands a little bit more fully. Place your hands alongside your ribs. Come up to all fours position. Notice that your hands are not right under your shoulders. It's not the traditional all fours position. Your hands are forward. So for your body, for the length of your thoracic spine, this is the right position for you as you tuck your toes under. Lift your knees up, but keep your knees bent. So lift your heels up with the knees lifted, the heels high. You can create a little bit more curve by lifting your sit bones. Now draw your right heel toward the earth to just give it a nice stretch to the back side of the leg. Bend your right knee again and reestablish this balanced curve of the lumbar spine. Straighten your left leg, just reach it down. And I don't know about you, but my heels don't hit the floor. Some people say that your heels should hit the floor, but for many of us, I think just working on the alignment to refine the curves of the spine makes a lot more sense than trying to force your hamstrings and your calf muscles to stretch so that you can draw the heels to the floor. But if you'd like to straighten both legs, then just check it out. See if you can draw the heels toward the floor, but not necessarily on the floor. Keep a nice lifting quality of the armpits, a nice fullness to the breath. Look forward and walk your feet up to your hands. Place your hands to your low back and rise up. I like lifting up from a forward fold by taking the hands to the low back, just so that you can get this nice alignment to the upper chest. The heads of the arm bones draw back, your shoulder blades hug in. Let's do one last standing pose, triangle pose, as a way to reinforce the elongation of the back sides of the legs, the nice elongation of the hamstrings, so that we can refine the flexibility to the legs even more fully for our downward facing dog. Step wide, turn your right toes out, keep your back heel planted nicely, lift your arms up. Draw in from the toes to the pelvis. Draw in from the fingers to the heart and down to the pelvis. And draw your right hand down to wherever it finds itself just naturally. Take your lifted arm to your waist. Look down. Now, especially if you have low blood pressure, you just want to keep your gaze down. But many of us can turn our head so that we're looking straight ahead. And if you've got more freedom in the neck, especially with your hand to your waist, maybe you can even take your gaze up. Just find out for you in this practice right now what works best for your neck on this side. If you'd like to add a lifted arm, by all means, go ahead and lift it up. From the strength of the back leg, root down to lift yourself up and out of the pose. Release your hands, turn your right toes in, turn your left toes out. Reinforce the strength of the legs by pulling the feet in toward each other before expanding out to open your chest, draw down, let the hand fall wherever it feels free to do so, on the shin, on the floor. Keep a nice fullness to the chest. Take the hand to your waist. Same thing. Where does it work for you on this side to take your gaze? Is it to the floor? Is it straight ahead? Is it lifted? From wherever it feels natural, lift your arm up, right arm up. Keep a nice steadiness as you root down through the back leg to inhale and rise up. Release your hands. Let's come once again to downward facing dog. Just to refresh and strengthen that muscle memory about placement of the hands relative to the feet and downward facing dog. Come to your belly with your hands right alongside your ribs. Come through all fours position. Just notice how far forward the hands are before lifting your pelvis up. And stabilize your foundation of the feet in your hands. Really spread the fingers and claw the mat with your fingers, with your feet parallel to each other. Bend your knees. Lift your sit bones high so you honor the natural curves as we were working on earlier. Now that your legs are nice and fully engaged and you've got this curve to the lumbar spine, see if you can draw your heels down, keeping the tops of the thighs back. The heels do not have to reach the floor, but as you come towards straight legs, see how you can keep the fullness of the natural curves of the spine as you draw the heels toward the earth. Walk your hands back to your feet this time. Bend your knees. Place your hands to your low back. Rise up. So there you have it. Just a few moves to help refine your downward facing dog. On those days where you feel like you don't know where to begin in your practice, downward facing dog is always a great starting point. Thanks for the practice. Namaste.